Right, so we created our Dreadnought, and it's all rigged up, so why don't we have a bit of a play with it, see what we can do. So let's unhide all our layers. There we go. Now, at the moment, we don't actually have a ground plane, and we don't need the tools out, so let's get rid of the tools. There we go. Now, on our top down, I'm going to create a plane. Here we go. Doesn't need to be massive, maybe about this big. There we are. And I'm going to give it some segments, maybe 20 by 20. Convert to editable poly. Okay, so this should give me a little bit of scope for perhaps doing some bits with this. Let's just apply some minor noise to this. Nothing exceptional, maybe a little bit on the Z. There we go. Let's make it a little bit lumpy and bumpy. Convert to editable poly. And I'll just use a quick NURMS on it. I'll just flatten it out a bit. Maybe even an extra iteration. Convert to editable poly. There we go. Now we have this floor here. Go to my front viewport and zoom. And let's lower it, well, raise it up to the height of our Dreadnought. There we are there. Okay, perspective. Now we have a couple of choices for how our Dreadnought can walk. There's two fields of thought here. One is that they will amble quite slowly. Another one is that they'll kind of stamp across quite quickly. Bit of weight behind them, a little bit of bounce, all that kind of business. So we'll leave that kind of up to you which one you choose. I'm just going to quickly link this onto the banner so it'll move with it for the time being. I can unlink it again later. So let's raise it up first. And what I need to do here is just take our control unit here, which is of course our power fist control. And I'm going to link that to the pelvis. Once I've done that, if I raise him up, he'll raise up. And once he's raised up like this, we get a lot more scope for actually being able to move his legs properly. Alright, so let's start him with his hip like this. And we've got 300 frames, so we can have him lurch forward. And he's going to lurch forward fairly fast. Now, normally, you know, for a slow move, I'd make walk steps about 40 frames. I'm going to make his steps 20 frames. So let's auto key. And the first thing he's going to do is going to get up. So by frame 20, once I've got rid of the frames that make him turn side to side, there we are. Right, by frame 20, let's have him kind of shuffle into a nice high upright position and lean forwards. So I'm going to grab this, lean it forwards, move him right forward like that. And if I grab this, I can then move it to about there. Maybe move it in a little bit. And let's just move this to our pelvis up and over like that. So he's stepping up and he's going to throw his foot forward. So if he's throwing his foot forward, just raise that up a little bit more. We can angle it up as well using the foot controller like this. And maybe even, you know, open up his toes a little bit on his left foot. So I'll just make sure I've got the manipulate tool on. So move that to there. Now, by the end of this, we want him to lower his foot. So just grab this Move it to frame 40. Ignore the fact that gun's moving in the background, I can't see it. And let's move his hip down again. Now we can see that this has been stretched a bit too far. So let's put this down. And we'll move in the toes. Okay, so that's the first foot kind of zooming into action there. Delete that. Now we've got a bit too much movement forward on this hip. Let's take it to frame 40 and just move that hip back a little bit more. And just find our control dummy for this foot. Let's bring that down. Okay, so it's done a massive stride forward like that. What's it going to do next? Well, let's say by frame, if it's going to stamp forward like that, it's probably going to swing his hip back across and raise this foot into the same sort of position. So, turn off the manipulate tool a second. There we go. Let's move this one to about here. And we can just raise this up a little bit. And maybe open the toes out on this. So right foot toes again. Hang on, let's go to my manipulator. There we go. So lift those toes up. Probably lift this a little bit more. Okay, and let's move this all the way across. So it's putting weight firmly on this leg at this point. Okay, that's fine. Now, go back to this one, and we're going to move this key here to here. So it's going to step forward, and then start moving this leg. So we want to swing this leg out, and then by here, well, we're going to need to move this hip forward a bit as well, because it hasn't moved forward any, it's just been moving side to side. So let's just force this hip forward. We can have it selected again. Okay, so it's going to go here, right forward, and by frame 80, come forward some more, by which point this leg's going to come all the way forward like this, and drop down. It's not too far, obviously. Let's drop this toe down a bit, and let's bring these in. There we go. At which point this is going to swing back across again. So if we've had the hip coming across, then it should come back. Okay, so you get a much better plod now, as you can see. Okay, we haven't even done any bounce yet, but don't worry, we will. So, I'm going to go here now, and with the hip swung across, let's move it forward to about here, and then we can raise this up to around about here. Let's put it equal with this foot, really. I mean, they're small steps, but they've got a lot of weight behind them, yeah? And as this is up like so, move this up and just adjust our left foot toes just a tiny bit. If we can get away with it, we'll sway this a little bit more to the left. And has that hip came forward at all? Yeah, it has. So step. Now you can see that slide going on there. So let's sort this slide out. What we need to do is drag frame 40 here to frame 80 here. Do that and the foot will stay in place. See? Alright. Steps, steps. That's came up, so we're going to have to move it again. Going to move it forward. I'll have to link that, so hang on, go all the way back again. It appears that this doesn't know that it's supposed to be linked to anything. There, now it's linked to something. Okay, so we're at frame 100, we've got the foot raised, like so. So, what are we going to do now? Well, let's go and select our hip. Our hip needs to come forward. Let's take it to frame 120. Being careful not to try and damage our model while we're doing it. Take this back a little bit here. I need to raise this foot a little bit more because it's not quite high enough. Make sure I'm not actually breaking it or intersecting with anything I shouldn't. Okay, take it forward to 120. And just slam it into the ground. Bring this one down. And then we can just adjust this. Okay, let's have a look at that hip. The hip's starting to pop out because this foot's a bit too far forward, but that's okay. We're about to swing this hip over to this side, because as it lands and plants its foot down, and that one's a little bit too far forward. Let's move it back a bit. There we go, that's better. That way we don't get as much of a massive kind of big sack of errors. Okay, let's grab this, go forward a frame, say 140. Just bring it forward like that. Just it's straightening off and is next to this. Just pull it in, maybe a little further down. There we go. And what I'm going to do with this one, just grab here, and I'm going to move my key to 120. I've just got shift held down, and then I'm going to drag this across and up. Not too far up though. Don't want to look like Scooby-Doo when we're done. Okay, lift that up. Just adjust my right foot toes. Bit of curl into them. Move this a bit further across. There we go. Okay. 140, so let's go to 160 now. And at 160, I'm going to drive the hip forward, just wait for autosave to do its thing. Now trust me, there are billions and billions of good tutorials out there that will teach you everything you could ever imagine about animation. I'm well aware this is just a very quick flyby showing you kind of, some ideas of things you can do. You want some really good animation classes, drop a few dollars or pounds or whatever, and go and look at some of the big boy classes. But, there's nothing wrong with getting some ideas and tips from this kind of thing. There we go. And let's move this along to here, like so. It's just going to kind of level it to there. And we're just going to kneel it a little bit like that. So it's going to stride forward. Right, let's put some slight bob into this. So, if it's going to jump up, then it's going to come down again a little bit. So let's give some down. Then it's going to go up. And then down. Up again here. Let's check that. It's putting its foot down here, so let's drop it down again. Frame 140, we can raise it up a little bit. And then frame 160, where it's going to land, have it come down like that. And perhaps a slight spring back up again. Not much, just a tiny bit. So, when it finishes, it'll be just a tiny movement there like that. Now what we want to do, just make a quick rotation keyframe just here. By the time I get to frame 180, let's just turn him like that. Okay, now if we go back here to about frame 160, I'm going to keyframe this for position, rotation, scale. I'm going to get to frame 185, let's say. I'm going to move this on the local. To about there. Okay. And at this point, now sliders can be quite interesting, but let's have the slider here for our finger slider 1. Let's change that a tiny bit. And the same here. Okay, and now when we move it to here, let's adjust our finger sliders a bit more. Okay, so we've opened it, and I've still got this on, so over here, I'll pull it a bit wider. And do that and that. Now over here, as that's happening, I'm going to grab this and just make a key. And as that comes around to here, I'm going to swing it right the way around, just to here. Thinking about it, it might be better actually linking this to the main carapace. There we go. Right. So I'm going to swing this around to around about here. And as it gets to here, let's have a look at that gun. I'm just going to keyframe it, then raise it up. I'll just Control C so I've got a camera in this spot so that I know I've got a good reference here, even though my camera appears to be wandering around for some obscure reason. Then my camera's got keyframe issues. Let's just select my camera. Yeah, it has. Let's just get rid of that. There. Okay, so when it gets to here, drop back into perspective. And at this point we can have it just kind of edge itself forward a little bit here. Just do a very small step. And just drop the foot down. Make it a very quick step, so I'll just adjust the timing on it a little bit. There we are. Now then, when it's doing this quick step, let's move the hip over here a bit. As it raises it, just short lift up and then down. Okay. I'm going to quickly change the linking on this arm again because I've just thought about it logically for the first time in about ever. And just move that to there. There we go. Right. Now I'm not sure what the rotation is for this arm. Let's have a look. Yeah, it's weird and wild. Really needed to be changed. Not something I should really actively change at the moment. Okay, let's put some tilts in. Now if we want to, we can tilt the pelvis a little bit. Like that. If we're going to, then we can also, mess around with this. What I'm going to do is if I'm going to tilt the pelvis, I'd go over to here and under link info I'd have no inheritance of any rotation over here on whichever axis that is, which I think is the Z axis. The Z axis? Let's find out. Yeah, it looks like the Z. Okay. So our little fella here is having a bit of a stride about now. Now that move there was a little bit airy. You see that one? See what's going on over here. Let's check the timings on this. I think really I should kind of clean this one up a little bit, make it a little bit narrower. So I can make the step end sooner, because they don't have to be completely even. Okay, that's better. Okay, so now we've got a nice little kind of test scene to use it in, and it kind of comes up into the scene. I think for its starting position on frame 0, I'll actually have this already in a standing position. I think it kind of looks better. There, that's a bit better. Now we can add a little bit of shoulder movement on this if you want. That's entirely up to you. If you add sway in, you're going to end up with a teeny bit of the old oh, what's it called again? It's kind of like a Stevie Wonder moves, you know. Just to show you, it's like suddenly walking like a funk store cowboy. I think personally it's better off without the magic footsteps. There we go, that's not bad. Okay, so that's not a bad little kind of segment there. I'm quite pleased with it. Basic as it may seem, but it hasn't taken us very long. And the thing about this is, now, if I go over here and just unlink that, just make sure it's left behind, I can now turn on the animation, generate the animation inside the banner just by clicking the simulate button. Before you do that though, obviously you want to go and save this as a workbench, unless you're quite mad. Okay, and then you'll just click simulate local. As you can see, the cloth is quite light and therefore it's deforming rather heavily. I mean, this isn't a particularly terrifying thing, it's not too much of a worry, but there we go. Because we can make the cloth stronger, obviously. As you see, it's kind of shaking off. There you go, it's fallen off even there. So let's erase the simulation. And make sure we've got an end frame here of 300. And then if we go into our object properties for our banner cloth, let's load a preset of some sort of generic heavy. And just click OK. Now let's see what happens when we click simulate. As you can see, it's a much heavier cloth. It's still, you know, quite bendy, but we really need to make it a lot more rigid than this. Although I've seen worse. It actually looks like quite nice at the end simulation there. Okay, let's end the simulation just by clicking escape. So you can see it's moving properly, it's just not quite heavy enough It's not quite rigid and starchy enough yet. So what we need to do is make this a much more rigid, starchy material. Let's erase the simulation, go to Object Properties, Banner Cloth. Now if we're using something like the generic heavy, which we already are, let's change the thickness on this to maybe 2. And the shear on this, I'm going to drop down to about 75. Density to about 0.08. And the damping to about 0.25. Don't really want any plasticity in this. Oh. So 0.05 just for the sheer hell of it. Anything else in here that I really want to change at the minute? No, that should be okay. So I'm just going to click OK. And then again click Simulate. And this time it should be a bit more rigid. There you go. It's obviously a lot heavier, as you can see. But obviously the Dreadnought is moving a lot more than, it was before. There we go. Quite a bit of bounce in there as well. There we go. I'll just let it finish what it's doing. And then hit Escape. Well, we don't need to, we'll just let the simulation end, in fact. And then if we look at our camera view, I think I need to dolly my camera back a little bit. And maybe up. There we go. So, as you can see now, it's really kind of rocking backwards and forwards on the Dreadnought. And then it comes around, and that's not bad. That's not bad. Play it again. More or less in real time. Okay. Just to show that we can do these things with our Dreadnought. Okay, so, trying to think what I'm doing in the next part. I will come to me in a minute.